women have played a silent but key role in times of crisis. Whether it was putting bread on the table or fighting for their rights, they did it all. However, the participation of women in the revolutions has never been stressed upon much. Women came into the forefront on October 5, 1789, when they marched to Versailles and brought King Louis XVI back to Paris. They wanted the king and government closer so they could keep an eye on their activities, to voice their opinions and interests. Political clubs were set up all over France. Of the 60 women's clubs that were initiated, the Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women was the most popular. The key issues raised by the Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women was equal political rights for women, similar to the rights assigned to men. Though many laws were introduced to improve the lives of women, like schools made compulsory for girls, marriage of own preference, divorce legalized, job training for women, yet the womenfolk were unhappy with the Constitution of 1791. They felt they were reduced to mere passive citizens, denying them the right to vote. Spearheading the cause of women from 1791 onwards was the eminent writer and political activist Olympe de Gouges. She fervently opposed the Constitution and the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen of 1791, as it completely ignored the rights of women. The Jacobin government rejected the demand for equal rights to women and sought to shut down all women's clubs across France. Olympe de Gouges subsequently drafted the Declaration of Rights for Women and Citizen in the same year and addressed it to the Queen and the National Assembly. She also criticized the Jacobin government for forcibly shutting down all women's clubs. Olympe de Gouges was charged with treason, and on November 2, 1793, she was sentenced to the guillotine by the National Convention. Another eminent lady in the history of the French Revolution who was guillotined in 1793 was Charlotte Corday. She assassinated Jean-Paul Marat, the Jacobin leader who was also responsible for the Reign of Terror. The revolution carried out by the women of France triggered revolutionary movements in many countries around the world, including the international suffrage movement. For the next 2 centuries, although French women fought for equal rights since 1789, it was only 2 centuries later, in 1946, that they won the right to exercise their franchise and equal wages. Maximilien Robespierre, whose tyranny in the French Revolution is remembered across generations, was also responsible for bringing about a revolutionary social reform, the abolition of slavery in the French colonies. Even before the French Revolution, in 1789, France had 3 colonies of the Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and San Domingo under its control. These places were major suppliers of sugar, coffee, indigo, and tobacco. As Europeans were reluctant to work in far-off lands, there was a shortage of labor at the plantations in these colonies. This led to the formation of a triangular slave trade between Europe, Africa and America, which began in the 17th century. Merchants sailed from the French ports to the African coast, where they bought Negroes, who were natives of Africa, from the local chieftains. In today's world, the word Negro is an offensive and racist term. We refer to them as Africans or African Americans. The slaves were then crammed into ships and transported to the French colonies in the Caribbean, where they were sold off by the plantation owners. This led to an increase in the population of black people in the Caribbean when compared to the whites. Port cities like Bordeaux and Nantes were flourishing economically because of the slave trade. Frustrated by the treatment meted out to them, many slaves fled from their colonies and formed a community called the Maroons, or runaways. Foreseeing a rebellion in the French colonies of the Caribbean, the National Assembly discussed the views of extending the rights of man to these colonies as well. Several deputies in the National Assembly supported the proposal to abolish the slave trade, but no action was taken. The agitated slaves of San Domingo began a rebellion against France. They made deals with Britain and Spain to join their armies and fight against the French. Keeping the current state of affairs in mind, the National Convention, headed by Robespierre, voted to abolish slavery in all the French colonies on February 4, 1794. Unfortunately, slavery was reintroduced 10 years later by Napoleon Bonaparte. The measure to finally abolish slavery in the French colonies came 44 years later, in 1848, by the French Second Republic. The years following the Revolution of 1789 saw many changes in the lives of the French in the way they dressed, the language they spoke, and the books they read. After the storming of the Bastille in July 1789, a law was passed by the revolutionary government abolishing censorship. This came as a breath of fresh air for the thinking intelligentsia, who were not able to give vent to their opinion on various things, especially during this period of political turmoil in France. The government took up the responsibility to put into practice the ideologies of liberty, equality, and fraternity. This replaced the rule followed in the old regime, where written materials such as books, newspapers, and cultural activities like plays could be performed only after an approval from the censors of the king. If disapproved, they were burnt and destroyed. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, contained in the preamble of the Constitution of 1791, asserted that every citizen had the right to freedom of speech and expression, which was his natural right. Subsequently, the press played a crucial role in the dispersal of written material such as newspapers, books, pamphlets, and pictures throughout France, for the benefit of the majority of the members of the Third Estate who could not read and write. Printed pictures and paintings were circulated, and pamphlets and books read aloud to them. Plays, songs, and processions made it easy for the common people to grasp the revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, and justice. Freedom of the press in the Declaration of 1791 supported the right to oppose views of events. This also paved way for political clubs to convince the others of their position through the medium of print. The French Revolution had a huge impact on the history of France in many ways than one. A warrior, emperor, despot who changed the face of Europe. A man of conviction, Napoleon Bonaparte was one of the greatest military leaders in history. He emerged out of the Revolutionary Wars and became the new savior of France. Born in 1769 in the island of Corsica, Napoleon Bonaparte studied in a military school in Paris. He earned his fame in his Italian campaigns. The Directory that was formed after the fall of the Jacobin government in 1794 lacked political stability, and this paved the way for the rise of the military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1799, he led a coup known as 18 Brumaire and became the first consul. Subsequently, by 1804, he was made Emperor of France. During his reign, he conquered a number of dynasties in the neighboring European countries and placed his family members to take charge. He codified the French law under the name the Napoleonic Code of Law, which gave rights to protect private property, and initiated the uniform system of weights and measures. He also centralized the government and reinstated Roman Catholicism as the state religion. He was regarded as a redeemer, bringing liberty for the people. However, over the course of time, his armies began to be viewed as an invading force into the lives of the people of France. He was defeated by Nelson, the commander of the British Army, in the Battle of Nile and at the Battle of Trafalgar. The Battle of Waterloo in 1815 was Napoleon's final defeat. He was imprisoned by the Duke of Wellington in the island of St. Helena, where he eventually died in 1821. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity formed the touchstone of the French Revolution, and many of Napoleon's revolutionary ideas had a long-lasting impact on France and the people. These ideologies spread from France across the rest of Europe, and also to other colonized societies across the world.